the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast with your host, Jackie Pilosoff.
No one should have to go through a divorce feeling alone and isolated. The Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast is a production of Divorced Girl Smiling, where every show is 30 minutes aimed to empower you, help you feel validated and understood, and connect you with some of the best divorce professionals in the industry. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and start smiling as you join us right now for the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found and always at divorcedgirlsmiling.com. Before we get started, I want to say something about the day your divorce is finalized. Among other emotions, it's a huge relief, and for me, it felt like a big weight was lifted off of me, and now I could just breathe and start a new chapter. But there's something that I didn't realize that was on the to-do list that comes with being officially divorced, and that is getting a new will and trust. If you live in Illinois, Emily Roswadowski is a wills and estate planning attorney who can help you redo your will and trust after divorce. This is so important. You need to do it really soon after your divorce. Now, it might sound overwhelming, but I will tell you, it's a fixed one-time cost. So unlike being billed by your divorce attorney, it's a fixed cost. You can talk to Emily as much as you want. The price is the same. She'll answer all your questions. Emily's been doing this for a long time. I really trust her. If you want to learn more, you can find her at emilyroslaw.com. I also want to tell you about a wonderful real estate agent in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. Her name is Shannon Lindstrom, and Shannon has been a realtor for a long time, but she's also a certified divorce real estate expert. So she really has a niche in helping people going through a divorce sell their homes and or buy a new one. Can't say enough about Shannon. She's really, really wonderful. So dedicated, so experienced, and really professional. If you want to learn more about Shannon, go to mndivorcerealestateexpert.squarespace.com. You can also find both Emily and Shannon in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. What is it like to live with a controlling spouse? And what is it like to get divorced from a controlling spouse? How does it affect your divorce? How is it affecting you? And what are some tips if you are divorcing a controlling spouse? We're going to go over all of that. This whole episode is dedicated to divorcing a controlling spouse. My guest is divorce attorney Tiffany Hughes. Tiffany is a Chicago and Florida-based divorce attorney. She's been practicing for 14 years. Hi, Tiffany.
Hi, Jackie. Thanks for having me.
Always nice to be with you. And we were talking before the podcast, and Tiffany and I were both saying, like, we have been in relationships with controlling people at one time or another in our lives. Tiffany, what was that like for you?
I think controlling means it's very like speculative, right? Of like, what does controlling mean to you? Like some people are controlled by like finances, some people are controlled emotionally. Some people are even controlled, unfortunately, physically, right? For me, like it was narcissistic tendencies, gaslighting. It was a lot of um, not wanting me to have a social life or to network with people and to which in my profession, like we go to lunch and they're like, we'll like have events and there's things that you do and like and I have a lot of colleagues that are attorneys and like you go and you meet with these people and they're men and they're women and they're, like and it was very much of like not allowed to do that. Arguments about, going out with, blah, blah, blah and doing this and oh, you're going to go and have coffee and you're dead. So it was a lot of control in that way. And again,
I,
very
I think you
narcissistic.
bring up a great point. Control is a really broad term. You hit it on the head about financial control. I think there's a lot of people listening who might be like, my spouse like monitors the checkbook, the money. That's a form of control, being controlling. Like Tiffany said, I don't want you going out to lunch with so and so. She's a flirt and, she's probably just trying to pick up guys and cheat on her husband. And I don't want you around that. That could be a
Right.
form of control. And when you get divorced from someone like this, they are going to try to control the whole divorce process, right? What does
Yeah.
that look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think you could kind of get an idea of the fact that everything is on their terms. So everything has to be subject to what they want. They're not interested in how things should be divided, or how what the law says, or how the other person feels, or what's fair, or the fact that, oh wow, she's the mother to my three children. Like, I don't know, maybe I should take into consideration, like, all of the things that she's done. But when you're dealing with somebody that's controlling, it definitely transitions into the divorce world, where now they want to control the divorce process. So it's,
I would
yeah.
think it would look something like this. And this is, I went through a divorce and did the litigation route, mediation, tried both. And by the way, this was in 2008 when I didn't know Tiffany, which I wish I would have. But if, and I'm not saying my ex was a controlling person, but if being someone who went through a divorce, it would look like, well, if you came up with an idea, the controlling spouse doesn't think it's a good idea because they didn't come up with the idea, or let's say you go to your lawyer and your lawyer says to your soon to be ex's lawyer, here's the parenting schedule that my client is looking to get. Well, your ex is controlling, so they're going to go, no, I don't like that at all. I want this. And it might not even make sense because they're just trying to control it. So I guess we'll get to the tips soon, but maybe there's a way where you can try to make the person feel like they came up with the ideas or wait for them to throw out the schedule so that they feel almost like you're appeasing them, which isn't really the right thing. But if we're talking about divorce, the biggest win you can get is getting what you want. So who cares how you
Right.
get it, really, right? So
Right.
it's just a way of, I want to tell people, if you're divorcing a controlling spouse, it's going to be a rocky road because nobody wants to be told what to do. And divorce, you are being told what to do by a judge unless you go to mediation. So tell me, Tiffany, I feel like mediation is the perfect divorce solution for people who have a controlling spouse because the spouse has control.
I think mediation is a good place for everybody, if you are able to reach agreements. So the controlling spouse has to be within the mindset of wanting to be reasonable and wanting to negotiate. Um, I think that if you're going to go to mediation, and what I do with controlling spouses in divorces is I strategically plan these little bombs of place, in places throughout the process, to where they feel as though they're winning. So, like, for example, it's they want something particular, an asset, right? They want something. But my client doesn't care about that. So I can draft up a settlement offer that has all these different options, but result in this same exact thing. But one of them or two of them may make him or her feel as though it's a huge win because they're going to get this. But in reality, it's exactly the same thing. It's just using them against themselves, right? So setting them off in a way to where they're like, oh, well, I'm winning. Look at this. She was willing to give me the couch and this, and I knew like, and she's like, I didn't even want the couch, right? So like doing
It's kind of
things,
playing a game, but I completely agree with the philosophy. But you
right?
you really have to play these little games, which is such a shame.
It is. It is. But you have to have, you have to know how to handle this. And that's where I work with the client of give me the lowdown on this person. I need to know how this person ticks so I can use that to help get this process done.
You're listening to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. I'm here today with divorce attorney Tiffany Hughes. She is the founder of her firm, the Law Office of Tiffany M. Hughes. And Tiffany and I are talking about controlling spouses and how that works in a divorce. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how the controlling spouse might be affecting you, why they're acting controlling, and tips if you're in this situation. We'll be right back. One of the hardest life decisions is, should we get divorced or should we try to save our marriage? Many couples go back and forth for months, sometimes even years, trying to make the right decision. Well, guess what? There's a process called discernment counseling that's dedicated to helping you and your spouse make these decisions. And I know somebody wonderful for this if you're in this situation. Her name is Dr. Ginny Wright, and she's a therapist. She's a therapist who specializes in discernment counseling, and she's actually a master practitioner of discernment counseling, which means she's had the most training you can get in the field. I love Jenny. I really trust her. This is not marriage counseling. It's a 1 to 4 session process, and it's a way to help you figure out what your next steps are. If you want to learn more, you can find Ginny at lwadiscernment.com. I also want to recommend a wonderful therapist named Julie Walton, who's in the Chicago and North Shore area. And I've known Julie for a few years now. She's an LCPC. She's been practicing for decades, I think. She's just so wonderful. She's committed to supporting individuals, couples, and families in navigating diverse, complex issues, which of course includes divorce, but also depression, trauma, abuse, family conflicts, and grief. So love Julie, really trust her if you want a really, really good therapist. You can find her at northshorereach.com. And you can find both Julie and Ginny in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. Welcome back to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. Are you getting divorced from a controlling person? That's what we're talking about today. My guest is Tiffany Hughes, divorce attorney in Chicago and Florida. She's been practicing for 14 years. And we met, we were just saying before the podcast, we've known each other for 5 years. So I have seen the work that Tiffany has done. I've referred people. They've all had great things to say. And Tiffany, let's get back to this, how the person listening who is divorcing the controlling spouse, what is how are they feeling? Like, what are some things, like, I would think you would be feeling helpless, you would be feeling frustrated, scared. How does a controlling person make the other person feel?
I think they make them feel very small, um, um, not cared about, not loved, not relevant, not important, that they're not sufficient. Without the other person, that they would be nothing. If they leave, if they decide to, get divorced, that they will, be homeless or be, you know,
So they're like a
you
bully.
know,
It can
definitely,
be like a bully.
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely.
And what about the controlling spouse? Why do people behave this way? I mean, I know we're not therapists, but we've been around the block, you in the divorce industry and me just in life in general. And why do people try to control others?
I think, when I see it, I look at the other person as being somebody that's really lacks self-confidence and doesn't it sees that like this other person is weak and wants to like, you know what I mean? Like tries to control them because of some internal, and sometimes it's like unfortunately like the way that they were raised when they were little and
Right.
maybe like their one of their parents was controlling and that's how they saw that like a man or a woman should be treated and like it's been ingrained in them but usually it's this like lack of self-confidence and this like I don't want her or him to go anywhere and I
Right.
know that I can't find anybody else and so they do
Right.
these things
Well, even subconsciously, I think it comes down to you're saying lack of self confidence. I think it's insecurity and I think it's anxiety. When we feel like we can control something, we have less anxiety because we're in control of it now. That's not a good way to deal with anxiety, but that's the way a lot of people deal with it. And also, you really hit the nail on the head about this. They wanna control you because they know, in other words, if you're not controlling the money, you're outta here. So, like, I know somebody who's in a marriage where the finances are all controlled by him, and that's the only thing he has over her. So, if she wanted to leave, it would be very difficult, and he knows that, and he also knows that he would make her life miserable, and so she's like, controlling people sorta trap you.
Absolutely. And that's when I'm working with a client, I very much tell them it's like, it's hard for me to explain because you're still inside of the box, but I'm on the outside. I'm out of the box. And I'm telling you, out here is very different. Right. And a lot of times they don't even realize how awful the control has been, to the extent, the extreme nature of the control that the other person has had on them until they start to really like, wow, like, oh, I get like, oh, the whole thing we talked about, like going to lunch with this person or doing this or doing that and the finances and this and how it was all part of this overall scheme.
Right, and sometimes it takes look, if someone's sitting in your office, Tiffany, they obviously filed for divorce and they know it's not good, but you're right, as time goes by and they get more into the divorce, it's almost like a blessing that you're getting this reassurance that you're doing the right thing because all these things are coming out and you're realizing you're with this person who was so much worse for you than you even thought.
Right.
So, I mean, I call that a blessing from God, just a gift, like saying, "Keep going, you're doing the right thing."
Absolutely.
All right,
Absolutely.
let's move on to tips for people dealing with a controlling spouse in the divorce. The first one is, well, I'm not saying like, I mean, the first one that comes to mind is establish boundaries and limit communication. Is this advice that you give your clients, Tiffany?
I mean, at the point that they're working with me, they need to limit the communication with the other spouse because it becomes like very emotionally like taxing. Like the process in and of itself, right, is emotional in nature. There's a lot going on. And it's not necessarily like the romantic aspect. It's emotional for all different reasons. Um, so I think it's definitely a good idea to limit the communication. Doesn't mean that there can't be conversations that are had, but there has to be new ways in which we form communication now because I can't have my client being harassed or being controlled or anything like that anymore. So now we have to talk about what communication looks like in a different way. And so first we got to do is limit the communication and
Okay,
then
let's
we
break
move.
the communication down. When you say limit it, meaning limit don't talk about stuff with the divorce. Like he might say, "Hey, I want to talk to you. I'd be willing to do this if you're like, if you start talking about deals that you're going to make in the divorce, I don't think that's a good idea, right? Is this what we're talking about? Or are we talking about communication like, you were never a good wife. I'm so glad we're getting divorced and abuse that you have to just tell the person, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I don't deserve this abuse. It's unhealthy for me and the kids and my well being, and we can't talk. So, two very different things. So, what kind of communication are we talking about here?
I mean, both are very relevant. The first one you mentioned about limiting communication as it relates to like offers and settlement and things like that. Um, I'm okay with doing that, having a client talk about those things when we're at a point where we know what we're going to offer. um Having conversations at the beginning, people want to talk about this and that and this, and you absolutely can't do that unless you're just trying to increase your attorney's fees like tenfold. Then that's a good idea if you
Mhm.
want to, pay more money in attorney's fees, because making agreements and then you find out later that you should have never made that agreement, it wasn't in your best interest. So never should you be talking about
Okay,
anything like
so
that.
tell me if you like this idea, Tiffany. Let's say you're a woman getting divorced and your ex calls you up and says, "Hey, I really want the boat. I've been going out on it all summer. And, I'd be willing to give you blah, blah, blah if I can have the boat." So I would think, tell me if I'm right, the best way to handle this is, I'm not going to make any decisions. Thank you for letting me know your feelings. I'm going to discuss it with my attorney and we'll talk about it at our next session or mediation or whatever, wherever you are in the process. So the best thing is, "Thank you. I appreciate your telling me that. I'll keep it under consideration and talk to my attorney." Because if you say like, "Oh, okay. That's actually sounds like a good idea because I don't really want the boat." Well, now
Right.
even if you don't want the boat, don't say it. Just be like, "Okay, thank you. Thanks for telling me." And don't even keep it really broad and vague.
Absolutely. And then, sometimes you don't even have to say like, "Oh, I'll talk to my attorney about it." You know, we just like, "Okay, thanks. That's good to know." Like, I definitely want to make this amicable. Um, so I appreciate you making that offer. And
Okay,
you can just keep
Tiffany,
it
you're
just to that.
so right. If some I think I just gave bad advice. You're right. You don't wanna
Mm.
say, "I'll talk to my attorney," because that puts up defenses right away, like, "Oh, she's
Sometimes.
squaring up. Everything's her lawyer. We can't even talk anymore." Good advice, Tiffany. Okay, are there any other kinds of communication? Like, what about the toxicity? You just have to say, "I'm not gonna speak to you when you're like this." I think we should just limit our communication to texting about the kids and the schedules and other things that involve the kids, and we shouldn't talk anymore.
Right. Absolutely. And you have to do that and establishing those boundaries very early on. And I think that'll set the tone for going forward for sure.
Okay, another tip I thought of is safeguard your finances. Like with a controlling spouse, I think there's a really big risk that the spouse would move money, take your name off accounts. Now you don't have access to anything and you have to ask the ex for money. So, what do you think? Do you tell people to open up their own accounts, get their own credit card?
I mean, it kind of depends on the particular like facts of the case. Um, I think the first thing that you need to do, which is the most important, is know what it is that the finances are. Like what are the accounts that we have? Like what are all the things that we have? Sometimes there's one spouse that handles all of that, and that spouse knows all of the things, and then the other spouse knows nothing. So if you are the one that doesn't have a lot of knowledge about it, you need to make yourself very familiar with all of the accounts that you have, whether your name's on them or not. If there are accounts that were opened up during the marriage, then they're arguably fair game, and they usually are. There's some exceptions. I'm not going to go into that today, but
Tiffany, how do you find out? What if you don't really know?
grab the mail. like see what's in the mail. Having, having sometimes like going in the wallet, like look at the cards in the wallet. Like, you know what I mean? Receipts will show the last four digits of a card that was used, right? Like, a lot of purchases are online, a lot of things are on emails, like a lot of things are on the computer, like, and sometimes you find out the things that you need to find out, which is all part of your household. You're not doing anything wrong by gathering all this
Absolutely.
information. So,
Absolutely. Okay, next tip is seek professional help, meaning a therapist and or a divorce coach because you don't have to go through this alone with no support. And Tiffany and I did a whole podcast about what your divorce attorney does and what your divorce attorney doesn't do. And one thing that a divorce attorney does not do is counsel you, sit and listen to you cry. Even though, Tiffany, you're an extremely compassionate person, we've talked about personal things, but it's just not a good idea. That doesn't mean you can't tell Tiffany, like, you're upset about something, but in order to do the real work of making good decisions and being calm, you need therapy, I believe, and a divorce coach.
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I am a therapist in a way, right? I feel like I am. But I need to know where you are emotionally. I need to know how you're doing. I need to know ways that I can make things easier. Sometimes things get overwhelming, or sometimes talking about things is overwhelming. It's anxiety driven for some people. Some clients want to know every single thing about the process and let's talk about it. And some people are like, Tiffany, I don't even want to like, I trust you. I know you're a good human. You very like referred very like highly from other people, and like I trust you.
So
And
you'll
just do
you'll
it.
share as much as the client wants.
Yeah, so I need to know where you are. As far as doing the deep dive into, the therapy that a person will need or will is way above my pay grade. You need a therapist to talk about how you're going to handle like how you're handling things at that time, acknowledging behaviors that you probably didn't know, and being able to set yourself set for success by when you're finally out of the box and you're in a new chapter of your life, and how you try to not to fall into the same, you know, like relationships again, which therapists can help you with. And like,
Right.
so it's all of the things with a therapist, and a divorce coach can help you through the process too. And there's just so many, but I highly recommend the therapist for sure.
Well, I this is what I would say about a divorce coach because I feel like a lot of people listening to my podcast are like, "What do these divorce coaches do?" I think the biggest help you can get from a divorce coach is that I think a lot of times people will go to their divorce attorney and the divorce attorney will say things like, "Well, do you want to keep the house? How do you feel about this?" And those are valid questions, but sometimes the person's like, "I don't know what I want." And that's where the divorce coach can really combine emotional support with practical advice and say, "Okay, let's figure out what it would look like if you do keep the house. Let's figure out why you really want to keep it. Is it a sentimental thing? Do you feel safe there? What is the reason? Do you want the kids to graduate from high school in it?" And they get so much more into like the emotional reasons and help you make these decisions so that then you can go tell your divorce attorney what you want because a lot of times people don't even really know. And it's a process. You don't figure it out in one day. You can go back and forth of what you want and don't want for 6 months.
Definitely. That's true. Very true.
All right, Tiffany, I can't believe we're out of time. That went by so fast. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Tell my listeners how they can reach you if they want to call you for a consult.
Well, thank you for having me. Love being here. Love chatting with everybody that's listening. If you wanna reach me, you can go onto, my website, which is THUGHES so THughesLaw.com. You can also reach me at Tiffany Hughes at THughesLaw.com. You can call the office at 773-893-0228. Either one of those is fine.
And you can also find Tiffany in the trusted professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling, which is divorcedgirlsmiling.com. And if you go to the website, you can also go there to read articles, listen to more podcasts, or sign up for my free consult where you can talk to me for 30 minutes, tell me your story, and I will help you figure out which professionals are the best fit for what you're looking for. So thank you so much for listening, everyone, and we'll talk to you real soon.